Hi, I'm here to give another tip on how to deal with depression. So, most people, when they think about themselves in a negative way, they start trying to think about like why it is that they are the way that they are, and they try and really work on those things. And I think that can be helpful sometimes, but that can take years and years and years. Like if you're negative about yourself because of your mom or your dad or your childhood or whatever, that's going to take years to explore, and that's something that can be really helpful. But I try and tell people, for example, if you go into the emergency room because you have a knife in your shoulder, you want them to stop the pain and stop the bleeding and then get the knife out. You don't want to sit and explain why the knife is there right then. And so the idea of cognitive behavioral therapy is really, stopping the pain and getting yourself on track today, as opposed to worrying just yet about why it all is the way it is. And so yes, like once you have today under control, we can really look at like, okay, well, why is it that that happens? And it might be helpful to look at some childhood stuff, but really looking at today. So one of the things I tell people, for example, is trying to not be so hard on themselves, trying to look at whatever they are hard on themselves about, like a negative quality that they have about themselves, and try and think of it as like, in what ways is that negative quality positive? So like, if you have someone who's really argumentative, for example, in a lot of senses, that can be a really negative thing, right? Like, someone that, you don't really like to be around because they're already like thinking in their head an argument, they're going to be argumentative with you. However, if you look at channeling that behavior, channeling that energy, channeling that thing about yourself into positive. So like that same person who's argumentative, wouldn't you want them on your side if you got arrested and you need an attorney? Yeah, you want an attorney who's going to really fight for you and want to say the last word and stuff like that. So what I do is I try and work with people on seeing how, instead of trying to eliminate behaviors, try and focusing them on in positive ways, in a positive direction. So that was, one example. Or say someone who is extremely critical of themselves. Yeah, you don't want to be always critical of yourself, but in what ways has that made you maybe a successful person or a driven person? And so, trying to, yeah, maybe doing that a little bit less and trying to give yourself a little bit more time for yourself, or time to take care of yourself or whatever. But if you stress out all the time, looking at that as like a positive thing, like I really care about my job and so I really put a lot of effort into it. Or I really care about things, which is why I worry about them so much. And then sometimes when you think about them in that positive way, it takes away the power of the situation and it doesn't become as anxiety provoking in time. So, I think it's a hard concept for someone to grasp just in a 3 or 4 minute video, but it's an idea that I work with clients on, so that way they can start seeing themselves in a more positive light and their depression starts to fade away a little bit and they start seeing their negative qualities or their bad qualities as positive. I talk to people about like, there's some horrific things that have happened in the world. Like, Hitler, he did some awful things. Imagine if his leadership skills were honed into positive, like feeding the homeless or whatever. I mean, he convinced a whole country to do some really negative things, some really horrific things. Imagine if his qualities were honed in a different way. So his leadership quality was great. The way he put it into action was horrible and horrific. And so even people who have really bad qualities, someone who lies a lot, all right, well, maybe they'd make a really good car salesman. And if you can kind of take that meaning away from it a little bit, that power away from it, sometimes you can actually make it into positive things. And maybe someone who lies really well can be a really great interrogator for the police department or whatever, because they they make people believe that they have information on them that they don't. They get a confession or whatever. So those are some ideas. And so, you can come in and talk about, what are some of the things that you have, and I can kind of help you to hone those things into positive things in your life. So I hope that was helpful, and that is how I go about treating this facet of depression.